Hello everyone, Tacticalist here, and welcome back to another multiplayer replay of Total Warhammer. Now, this replay actually was submitted by Greasus, who did post the replay in both Human Boy's server and my server, so I'm not sure if Human Boy is going to cast the same battle as I am, but either ways, here it goes. For the Ogre Kingdoms here, played by Greasus, he is going with Greasus leading the army. With Cash Cascade providing the melee attack buff, everyone has their prize for that Rampage and melee attack plus leadership debuff, Scepter of Titans. I think he basically brought his full load out. Yeah, he brought all their items and abilities. Horde Master over Tyrant's Crown, just going for a very expensive Greasus, but he is quite slow, so we shall see if he can catch up to the Wood Elf, who are quite fast and agile. He is supported by Troll Guts and... Wait, there's no Troll Guts. Tooth Cracker and Bone Crusher Caster. It is Law of the Great Maul, but it is coming in only for those missile resistance spell and a bit of AoE damage. The rest of the army here, front line of Pickback Riders. I don't see any regular Nobblers. Ogre Bulls with Iron Fist for some extra missile block chance, and also one single Iron Guts at the back there. Going fairly narrow with the investment mostly going into the Ogre Bulls and the mobility in the form of Mournfang Cavalry and mostly just Mournfang Cavalry. A single Nobbler Scrap Launcher. I do call it Crap Launcher because it is not that great for an artillery. As the Ogres, you have a better anti-infantry artillery option, and that is the Lead Belchers, but we're not seeing here today, so we will be seeing how the Crap Launcher performs. More Mournfang Cavalry on the right flank, one with Iron Fist for the missile block chance, one without. I assume they ran out of money for the extra missile block chance. For the other side of the battlefield, for the Wood Elves here, going with a bunch of Glade God with Hackbane tips, so with a bit of poison damage and no armor piercing. Eternal Gods providing the armor piercing anti-large in disguise. Sisters of Twilight supported by Spellsinger of Life with Earthblood and Awakening of the Wood. And then there's a ton of Vanguard mobility with a bunch of Wild Riders deployed on the corner of the battlefield, Wild Hunters of Kernus with more Wild Riders. None of them have shields outside of the Regiment of Renown, and one single Glade Rider with Hackbane tips. That's it for the army builds here. Now let's get the battle started. Now, this battle isn't from some competitive tournament with some highly skilled gameplay, so do expect with some beginner mistakes in this battle. However, I do think that, especially for newer players, this is a really nice battle to just pick out some things worth noting in combat. Now, first of all, we have some Ogre Bulls and the Nobbler Scrap Launcher pushing up and receiving some missile resistance from the Tooth Cracker. That is not quite enough to mitigate the massive AP damage from the Sisters of Twilight focused shot though, so they are still gonna have a dent on their HP bar. And on top of that, with all their attention turned to the front of the Wood Elves, the Ogre Kingdoms forgot to check behind them, and these Wild Hunters of Kernus, Wild Riders who have been Vanguard deployed behind their formations there on the edge of the map, was not spotted by the Ogre player, and all these Ogre Bulls, Mournfang Cavalry just push up ahead, leaving this Nobbler Scrap Launcher completely exposed to this rear charge, quickly getting annihilated by the anti-large AP attacks. Now the Ogre Bulls and Iron Guts are trying to respond, going back to save the Scrap Launcher, but that is way too late. The Scrap Launcher has been shattered, while the Wild Riders, being way faster than the Ogre Bulls' monstrous infantry, are just free to quickly pull back, while the Sisters of Twilight is just free in the skies to keep poking at the enemy cavalry and single entity there. I think there was a little bit of a fist, the Bone Crusher there, doing some AoE damage to the Glade God, or the Scrap Launcher landing some shots as well, but unfortunately the Scrap Launcher is no more being sniped out by the Wild Rider Alpha Strike. Now, Greasus, Goldtooth, and the Ogre Bulls Pickback Riders are fanning out. A decent response from the Ogre player here, just trying to cut off the enemy escape, trying to catch them and wrap them up with the Ogre units. The problem is that Wild Riders are just extremely fast, and it is very hard for the Ogres to catch them out of position, unless you're using something as a bait to lure them into a melee fight. Now the Mournfang Cavalry getting charged down by the Wild Hunters and surrounded by Wild Riders, taking insane damage in that engagement, and because they're fast enough, they're quickly disengaging before the Ogre Bulls can completely catch these Wild Riders. Good news is that the Ogre Kingdoms at least has been charging up some of their army ability as they have been charging their units. Well, over here, Ogre Bulls once again going into a charge, doing some decent damage to the Wild Riders, and they have successfully charged up the first tier Dismember ability, slowing down these Wild Riders here, allowing the Ogre Bulls to keep just hacking them down, and the Mournfang Cavalry continues to just fan around and cut off the escape of the Wild Hunters of Kernus and the Wild Riders, managing to catch these slowed down Wild Riders, and because they're so blobbed up, another Bone Crusher coming in, fisting these Wild Riders in the face, and doing some decent damage. Haven't seen this spell for quite a while, but nice to see it to be used once again on the battlefield. Anyways, the Mournfang Cavalry unfortunately getting charged by the anti-large AP Wild Riders, the Wild Hunters of Kurnos. They are taking substantial damage, and with Sisters of Twilight shooting them from behind, they have been routed, while the Wild Riders are now free to extract themselves with nothing to stop them, getting a bit of an Earthblood heal from the Spellsinger nearby, just keeping these Wild Rider models alive. Cash Cascade has been cast on to this area here, buffing all the melee attack of these Ogre units, but that is still a little too late. Most of the Wild Riders have extracted themselves from this melee engagement, and if you can't catch your opponent, the melee buffs are not going to be useful. Pickback Riders on the side there, just pushing back those Glade Riders, and not doing anything but other than absorbing all the ammo from the Skirmishing Cavalry, which is not bad at all, actually. At least those shots aren't going into the actual Ogres, and are just spent on some worthless Nobblers. Now, I believe this was on Land Battles ranked multiplayer, so this was literally the Wild West of multiplayer, no attacking rules, and the Wood Elves are retreating and not engaging the Ogres. Meanwhile, all these Ogre Cavalry are getting picked off by the Sisters of Twilight on the sky, who is actually diving down onto Greasus and being rampaged by the Everyone Has Their Prize ability. A very nice response from the Ogre player there, and now everything is piling onto this Wood Elf Lord. Now the Sisters really aren't going anywhere, especially there's another Dismember coming in to pin down this Wood Elf Lord even longer, slowing her speed down to a meager 36. Now the poor Forest Dragon truly stuck between a bunch of monstrous sized models, allowing the Mournfang Cavalry, Ogre Bulls, and Greasus himself pile onto this massive dragon model and start punching it down with all those AP attacks, especially Greasus here. Getting Massacre, getting the Scepter of Titans, basically 100% armor-piercing weapon damage, boost almost 1000 weapon strength, and the Sisters just goes down and going down fast. Now, if there's a couple more strikes coming into the Sisters, maybe they can even finish her up, but it seems like the Ogres might have something else they want to do here. The Mournfang Cavalry and Ogre Bulls moving away from the Sisters, which is certainly a big mistake here. The Sisters burst heal takes some time to activate, and you can definitely finish them off right here, right now, which will give the Wood Elf units a permanent leadership debuff, though the Sisters have managed to escape alive, and the Ogres have no way to finish the last bit of her HP. Now, if we go into fast forward here, we can see that the Sisters getting that burst heal from the Entwined Destiny. Not that it matters, but yeah, still able to get off the map, injured but alive. Now, all these Wood Elf units are suffering from a debuff called Lord Fled, recently debuff, which is minus 16. Seems to be pretty big, right? However, this debuff actually has a time limit and will disappear eventually, while the Lord Dead debuff will persist throughout the entirety of the game. Killing the Lord only gives you minus 10 leadership debuff, but it is a permanent one. And with the pace of this battle going, the Wood Elves very much will be able to wait out the Lord Fled recently debuff, but they would not have waited out a Lord Dead debuff. The Ogres have regrouped once again, moving towards the enemy army, being showered with arrows. Now, the Mournfang Cavalry are trying to charge into some Wild Hunters of Kurnos and Wild Riders, who saw these weakened Mournfang Cavalry and thought, I can take them just fine. Earthblood has been healing up these Wild Riders, and the Wild Hunters of Kurnos certainly doing a good number on the Mournfang Cavalry, but they themselves being pinned down in melee combat, exposing themselves to a devastating Bone Crusher, killing a bunch of HP on these expensive Wild Riders, and on top of that, Cash Cascade providing massive attack boost to all these Ogre units. On the far side there, Ogre Bulls charging into spears. Quite unfortunate there, being pinned down by all those anti-large units and being shot up by the Hackbane tips from behind. A little bit of mistake from the Ogre player here, probably could have sent some Pigback Riders onto these Eternal Gods and then send some of the Ogre units around and flank those Glade Gods with Hackbane tips, or immediately force pathing those Ogre infantry through the enemy infantry who has been knocked over by the Ogre charge, and then start punching down the Glade Gods. But right now, these Ogre Bulls have been pinned down in melee combat against anti-large spears and will be dragged down and shot up by the Wood Elves. Anyways, over here, Wild Hunters of Kurnos and Wild Riders are unable to extract themselves earlier because of the Everyone Has Their Prize debuff from Greasus Gold Tooth. We are a bit late, so we missed most of the effect duration, but there certainly was the rampaging effect earlier and reducing their melee attack as well, which helps the Ogres a lot in this fight and managing to push back the Wild Hunters and Wild Riders. Glade Riders as well, taking substantial damage, but overall, I don't think the Ogres are in a good situation at all. It's been a while since the Sisters have fled, and yeah, you can see the Lord Fled recently debuff has already gone. So yeah, for the Wood Elves at this point it is just business as usual, no more leadership debuffs. Even the Glade Gods getting caught in melee by Ogres are fighting on just fine with Eternal Gods reinforcing. We'll go back into fast forward here as the Mournfang Cavalry continues to pursue the enemy Wild Riders and whatnot, while the Ogre Bulls trying to push back the enemy Glade Gods and Eternal Gods, but they themselves have been dragged down. Somehow the tattered Wild Riders managed to regroup and counter-charge once again into the Mournfang Cavalry with Iron Fist and actually beat them in melee combat, despite the Iron Fist Cavalry being relatively healthy earlier. And nice, everyone has their prize though, rampaging those Wild Riders into the Pigback Riders, and that shall be the end of the Wild Hunters. We'll go back into fast forward here as the last bit of the Ogre Bulls, extremely tattered, have retreated away from the range of these Hackbane tips, trying to regroup with the rest of the Ogre army. Balance of power is still fairly even, but that's only because the Ogre Kingdoms have the single entities propping up their balance of power. The problem is that none of these single entities are good at clearing out enemy infantry. All these Archer Fire can easily strike these large models of Ogre single entities, especially Greasus, not having a whole lot of armor. After a plus 30 armor from the 2 Cracker, he still only has 64 armor. All these anti-large spears also trade really well into the Ogre single entities here, and eventually they will just get dragged down by the focus fire and the anti-large poke of the spears. A great catch with the everyone has their prize onto the Sisters of Twilight, but unfortunately letting the Sisters of Twilight go and not finishing the job, and that would be a Wood Elf victory. Before we go into the army performances, just want to quickly go through some of my own thoughts on the Ogres versus Wood Elf matchup. You might know that I'm a massive Ogre enthusiast in terms of factions, so yeah, here are some of my ideas that how the Ogre Kingdoms can deal with the Wood Elf Archers and mobility. We're still taking Greasus not because he is the best lord in this matchup. It is still unfortunately the Slaughtermaster with the Great Maul, but Glennis decided to go with Greasus as their army's lord, and I was inspired to continue this Greasus Ogre army build theme. So, Greasus, more expensive, meaning that you can afford less units and also only afford cheaper units. So we have to cut off some of the units here. We're not bringing any trappers, but instead bringing a nobler front line with a second line of Pigback Riders, trying to go for the sheer numbers there to delay the enemy's spears. Basically screen out the enemy units there. So if the spears say they get pinned in the front line, say over here, the archers at the back will have to stay behind them, and they won't necessarily be able to reach the lead belchers. But lead belchers outranging, the archers can certainly reach the archers and pound them with the sheer amount of artillery. And once the first line of nobblers starts faltering, you throw in the second line of Pigback Riders. Well, at the back we have all the Saber Tusk packs and the Blood Vultures here. Just standing by, don't really need to go after the enemy archers because that's the Lead Belcher's job to deal with them. And instead just waiting for the Wild Riders to come through. And once the Wild Riders starts wanting to charge the Lead Belchers, for example, the Saber Tusk packs and the Blood Vultures will just pounce on them, hoping to intercept the more expensive Wild Rider mobility of the Wood Elves. And then the Sky Striders can come in and destroy them in melee combat. And because we have so many models on the field, we have enough numbers to delay the enemy infantry advance, allowing the Lead Belchers to pound the enemy infantry, including both the missiles and the melee troops. And the Blood Vultures can get the drop onto the Wild Riders, doing some pretty good damage to the rather glass cannon Wood Elf light cavalry. Greasus go to not bringing any items, just that everyone has their prize for that rampaging control, just to keep those enemy units pinned down in melee. He's a decent fighter, but he's way too slow to catch up to the Wood Elf characters, so you don't really need him for his melee prowess anyways. So yeah, that is a build that I would bring against the Wood Elves if I really want to play Greasus. Otherwise, I would just use a much cheaper Slaughtermaster of the Great Maul there and dump all the extra funds into nobler trappers. But yeah, for the army performances here, Panopod or Glennis here, going with the Greasus build, getting some solid value with Greasus, smashing the Sisters of Twilight in melee with the giant jewel adorned club. Unfortunately, not able to earn back his value simply because he was not able to catch up to these much more agile, much faster Wood Elf mobility, and just couldn't really get a fight he wants. He is just too slow and bulky. Butcher did some good damage with the Bone Crusher, and the Ogre Cavalry did some good damage as well, just not quite able to carry the game here, as the rest of the army here, the Nobler Scrap Launchers didn't earn back their value, neither did the Iron Guts and most of the Ogre Bulls with Iron Fist. This one though earned back double their value, almost double their value. Definitely did some solid work against both the enemy cavalry and the enemy archers. As for the Wood Elves here, the Sisters of Twilight did some okay damage, but got caught by that everyone has their prize and getting swarmed by a horde of Iron Fist Mournfang Cavalry and also some Iron Fist Ogre Bulls as well. Just that unfortunately for the Ogre Kingdoms, they were not able to finish off the sisters in the end and allowed them to get off the battlefield alive. And then the whole game was basically carried by the Wild Riders here, specifically the Wild Hunters of Kurnus here, trading really well into the Armored Ogre Cavalry with their anti-lodge and armor piercing, and then the Glade Guards finishing the job by shredding through the HP of all these Ogre Bulls with Iron Fists. Even with the missile block chance, the sheer volume of fire is just too much for the Ogre Infantry. Eternal Gods didn't do a whole lot of damage, mostly there just to hold down the enemy Ogre Bulls, delay their advance, allowing the Glade Gods to do the damage from afar. And yeah, that is it for today's battle. I hope you all enjoyed this little battle of multiplayer. If you want to see more Total War Warhammer multiplayer action, be sure to like this video and subscribe to my channel. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Tactical Lich, signing out.